system. It is discussed under different headings. The first one is the chewing and the swallowing. That is the process which occur in our mouth that breaks down the large food particles into smaller food particles so that it is easier to absorb the nutrients from these particles. The chewing process or mastication, it is called as, begins in the mouth. Okay, and then the next is the swallowing or deglutition. Okay, swallowing or deglutition consists of three phases. The first is the oral phase, then the pharyngeal phase, and the third one is the esophageal phase. We have discussed about the swallowing or deglutition process in detail. Then we discussed about the esophageal motility, how the food gets transferred from the esophagus, the upper end of the esophagus, to the through the lower esophageal sphincter into the stomach. And then we have started about discussion about the gastric motility. Okay, how the processes occur in the stomach. Okay, just a recap, the physiological anatomy of the stomach. This is the esophagus at its lower end. This is the cardia of the stomach, and this is the sphincter, the lower esophageal sphincter or the cardiac sphincter. Okay, then this is the fundus of the stomach, the body of the stomach, the angular notch, the pyloric sphincter at the lower end of the stomach, the antrum of the stomach, and these are the multiple folds in the mucosa of the stomach, that is called as rugae. Okay, and this is the duodenum into which the pyloric sphincter opens up. Okay. Now regarding gastric motility, the different functions of gastric smooth muscle. First is to relax the to accommodate the food from oral area. Once there is entry of the food, the gastric smooth muscle first relaxes from the oral side. Okay, this is called as receptive relaxation. When the food is there in the esophagus, then the lower the proximal part of the stomach starts to dilate. That is called as receptive relaxation. Okay, to accommodate the food that is coming. Okay, then the second is mixing of the food with the gastric juice. This process occurs in the caudate area, that is towards the distal half of the stomach. Okay, that is the caudate area. This is by retropulsion. Okay, mixing of the food with the gastric juices. And the third is the propelling of the chyme. The food which is mixed with the gastric juices is called as chyme. It propels the chyme into the duodenum. This process also occurs in the caudate area, that is the distal half of the stomach, and the process is hastened by the pump-like function of the antral muscle, that is called as antral pump. Okay. Then motility of the ORAD area, contractile activity. There are low amplitude contractions which occur as the meal empties. Okay. Then receptive relaxation. VIP stands for vasoactive intestinal peptide. This is the neurotransmitter which is responsible for the receptive relaxation. Okay, this is brought by vagovagal reflex, that is from the vagus and to the vagus. Vagal afferents carry the impulse to CNS. When there is food coming into the stomach, the impulse will go through the vagus nerve, afferent branches of the vagus nerve, to the central, that nervous system, CNS, and then the vagus itself is again the efflux. Efferent nerve, vagal efferent, will carry the impulse from CNS to the stomach. This is called as vagovagal reflex, that is responsible for the receptive relaxation. Okay, if the vagus nerve is cut, that is called as vagotomy. Okay, tomy is to cut open, as in anatomy. Okay, so the vagotomy is in which the vagus nerve is cut. That process will abolish this vasovagal reflex, and there will not be any receptive relaxation. Okay. For this receptive relaxation, the neurotransmitter is responsible. Yes?
Ma'am, some students are not able to enter.
Okay, just let me see. I can see there are 84 students who have joined. I don't see any students waiting. Okay. Yes, now any more students who are waiting? I can see there are 85 students at present. Okay. Let them try. The link is open. I have not stopped anyone from joining. They can auto join. Okay. So we will continue. Okay. So we have discussed about the receptive relaxation that occurs in the stomach once the food is there in the esophagus. Okay. Then the another function is gastric distensibility. Okay. Another point, that is gastric distensibility. Stomach distance on arrival of food. This is due to the cholecystokinin, CCK. Cholecystokinin
घंटा ज्वाइन कर
increases.
देगा, लिंक ओपन है.
Can you please mute yourself if you are talking to someone else? Okay, cholecystokinin increases, and this cholecystokinin hormone decreases the gastric emptying. So the food will remain there in the lumen of the stomach for a longer time. Gastrine effects are there, which is not physiological. In the normal concentration in after the meal, the action of gastrine is not much responsible for gastric distensibility. It is responsible for pharmacological doses. When we give more than the regular amount from outside, then it is responsible for gastric distensibility. Okay. Then coming to the motility of the caudate area, peristalsis is the primary contractile event which occurs in the distal half or the caudate area of the stomach. Okay. Peristalsis, the pressure tracing shows that there is increased magnitude of contraction on approach to the antrum. When the food comes, the peristaltic contraction comes, there is more the pressure. If you monitor the pressure in the stomach, it is seen that there is increased magnitude of contraction when the food approaches towards antrum, and there is decreased phase lag on approach to antrum. Okay, this decreased phase lag causes increase in the velocity of the peristaltic wave, and this is responsible for mixing of the chyme or formation of the chyme when the food bolus gets mixed with the gastric juices, okay, and forms chyme. So this is about the motility in the caudate area. Then coming to regulation of gastric emptying, how this is regulated: the chyme, that is food, and the gastric juices must enter duodenum at proper rate to allow for the proper absorption of the nutrients in the intestine. The pH of the chyme must be optimal, or that is high, for the enzymes to function in the small intestine, and the entry of the chyme should be slow enough that it facilitates the proper nutrient absorption. Okay. For that, the gastric emptying has to be a gradual and slow process. How is it allowed, or how it is planned? That is, we will discuss under the regulation of gastric emptying. Okay. Immediately after the meal, emptying does not occur before the onset of gastric contractions. Okay. Once you have taken the meal, the gastric emptying will not be there. First, there has to be gastric contractions. Okay. Then, what are the conditions which favor gastric emptying? First one is the increase in the tone of the orad stomach, that is the proximal half of the stomach. There is increase in the tone. Second is the forceful peristaltic contraction. Third is the decreased tone of the pylorus. The pylorus is the distal half of the later part of the stomach, if you remember in the diagram. Okay, this is the orad part and this is the caudate part. Okay, so here there will be increase in the tone, and here the pyloric sphincter, there will be decrease in the tone. So this will open up, that will allow the food to pass. Okay, then absence of segmental contractions in the intestine. Okay, and that is why the food can pass from the lower end of the stomach or the pylorus to the duodenum. Okay, stomach emptying. The stomach emptying or gastric emptying is promoted by intense peristaltic contraction in the antrum of the stomach. At the same time, emptying is opposed by varying degrees of resistance to passage of chyme at the pylorus. When pyloric tone is normal, each strong peristaltic wave forces up to the several millimeters of chyme into the duodenum. Thus, the peristaltic wave, in addition to causing mixing in the stomach, provide a pumping action that is called as pyloric pump. Okay. Then, emptying of the stomach is controlled only to a moderate degree by stomach factors such as the degree of filling in the stomach and excitatory effect of hormone gastrin on the stomach peristalsis. Probably the more important control of the stomach emptying resides in inhibitory feedback signals from duodenum, including both enterogastric inhibitory nervous feedback reflex and hormonal feedback by cholecystokinin. Okay. Then these feedback inhibitory mechanisms work together to slow the rate of emptying when there is too much chyme already present in the small intestine, or the chyme is excessively acidic, or the chyme contains too much unprocessed protein or fat, is hypotonic, or it is irritating. Then the gastric emptying will be slowed. So this ensures that the food is absorbable in the small intestine in quantity and quality. Then only the chyme will be released into the duodenum. Okay. In this way, the rate of the stomach emptying is limited to that amount of chyme that the small intestine can process. Okay. gastric emptying is accomplished by coordinated activities of stomach, pylorus, and small intestine. So you can see this is how is the position of the stomach after the meal. Okay, immediately after the meal. This is how it is. Then what are the conditions which will favor emptying? There is contractions going on here and the sphincter opening. Okay, this is the orad part which is contracting, and this is the caudad part which is relaxing. The pylorus is opening. Then the food which is mixed here because of these contractions will pass from the pylorus and open in the pass into the duodenum. Okay, when the pyloric sphincter is open. And what happens when the intestinal receptors are activated? Then you can see this is inhibitory thing. When these receptors are activated, there are contractile activity begins in the small intestine, and these are the intestinal receptors. Okay, we will discuss about it. Regulation of gastric emptying, activation of receptors in the intestinal mucosa initiates enterogastric reflex. Okay, what is enterogastric reflex? Because of the food in the coming into the intestine, the gastric action is on the stomach. Okay, this decreases gastric emptying by number 1, relaxation of the orad stomach. The proximal stomach will relax. Number 2, decreased force of peristaltic contraction, and number 3, segmentation contraction in the intestine. So here you can see there is, here it was contracted in the favoring to favor the gastric emptying, but when the intestinal receptors are activated, the proximal stomach is dilated and there is segmentation contraction occurring in the distal part. What happens here? Decreased force of peristaltic contraction. Okay, the relaxation of the orad stomach, decreased force of peristaltic contraction, and segmentation contractions in the intestine. Okay, then
Ma'am, excuse me.
yes,
I'm really sorry to disturb you, but some students are still not able to join. Perhaps the auto admit option is not enabled yet.
it is. I have allowed all the students to come in. It is. Uh,
Uh,
Anyways, this lecture is being recorded, so I will share this lecture on YouTube immediately after the class, so that those students who have missed can see the lecture. Okay,
okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
ask them to keep on trying. If they can join, well and good. Otherwise, I will share the recording. Okay. Coming
Ma'am,
to
can you
intestinal.
see them in the
Yes.
waiting list? Can you see them in the waiting
No,
list?
I don't see anyone waiting. Okay,
Okay.
okay. There are few. Okay.
Thank you so
So we
much,
start
ma'am.
again. Intestinal mucosal receptors. Intestinal receptors and gastric emptying. What is the role of intestinal receptors? Intestinal mucosa receptors. These are stimulated by high or low osmolarity, acid, fat, and protein. Okay. Intestinal mucosal receptors. When there is high or low osmolarity in the intestinal lumen, presence of acidic, fat, or protein particles in the intestinal lumen, the receptors get stimulated, and these receptors trigger the enterogastric reflexes. What happens? Because of the fats or proteins, the cholecystokinin, CCK is the short form for cholecystokinin, gets released, and it increases the gastric distensibility. So the stomach will dilate, which increases the which decreases the gastric emptying. So because of the fat in the lumen of the small intestine, the cholecystokinin hormone will release, and that will increase the gastric distensibility. So the food will be coming into the duodenum slowly. So it allows for the fat to be absorbed properly from the small intestine. Okay. Then acid, how it will affect? It will decrease the gastric emptying in 20 to 40 seconds via intrinsic neural reflex. Okay. If there is too much acidic content in the intestine, the intestinal mucosal receptors will decrease the gastric emptying. It will slow down the gastric emptying in 20 to 40 seconds, and thus the content will not be too much acidic. Okay, then involvement of other hormones, probably not at the physiological level. So next is powerful duodenal factors that inhibit the stomach emptying. Which are those factors? The type of the factors that are continually monitored in the duodenum and that can initiate enterogastric inhibitory reflexes include the following. 1. Degree of distension of the duodenum. 2. The presence of any degree of irritation of the duodenal mucosa. 3. Degree of acidity of the duodenal chyme. 4. Degree of osmolality of the chyme. And 5. presence of certain breakdown products in the chyme, especially breakdown products of proteins and perhaps to a lesser extent of fats. Okay, so these are the factors which will affect the gastric emptying, rate of gastric emptying. Why is it important to understand the gastric emptying? Is because there are some issues with gastric motility. Then the gastric emptying can be slowed or hastened, and because of that, the person will feel a lot of problems. Okay, like slow gastric emptying. This is the most common problem. What happens? The symptoms that the person will complain of in patients with slow gastric emptying is they will always feel that their stomach is full, fullness. Okay, then they will not feel like eating, loss of appetite. Okay, then nausea, that is discomfort or feeling like the food there is increased salivation and they don't feel like eating, and there is a tendency that they feel that there will be vomiting. Okay, sometimes it is associated with vomiting also. What are the causes that causes slow gastric emptying? Either there is gastric ulcer because of the scar tissue that is there in the stomach. After the ulcer, the gastric emptying will be slowed. Okay, then cancer, which is growing. Okay, if it is an outgrowth in the gastric mucosa, then it will be physically obstructing the gastric emptying, and thus there will be slow gastric emptying. Then scleroderma, this is a connective tissue disease which can also cause slow gastric emptying. Then eating disorders. Okay, these are mainly psychological diseases like anorexia nervosa, in which the patient does not feel like eating. They tend to decrease their food intake because of certain psychological factors. Okay, then bulimia nervosa. This is also a psychological disorder. Here the person tends to eat a lot. Okay, that is bulimia nervosa. And obesity. All these eating disorders can lead also give rise to slow gastric emptying. And the last one is vagotomy, that is in which the vagus nerve is cut open. Mainly this is done to reduce the gastric acid secretion, and because of that the side effect will be slow gastric emptying. The stomach emptying will be reduced, and because of that the person will complain of fullness, loss of appetite, nausea, and sometimes vomiting. How do you treat these patients? Treatment includes the pyloroplasty, that is the surgical treatment of the pylorus, in which the pylorus is cut open and it allows for the proper gastric emptying. Okay, another one is the balloon dilation. This is non-invasive procedure, as mean the stomach is not actually cut open. Through esophagus or through mouth, a catheter is passed, and at the end of the catheter, the tip, it consists of a balloon. Okay, once the catheter tip has entered the pyloric opening, we have to inflate the balloon that is there so that the pylorus gets opened. Okay, the pyloric sphincter will be opened, and thus the gastric contents will be emptied. Okay, this is one-time procedure, not repeatedly. Okay, so these are the surgical treatments, pyloroplasty, and balloon dilatation is a non-surgical treatment. Another problem that can occur with the gastric emptying is gastroparesis. Okay, what is gastroparesis? It is the slow emptying of the stomach or paralysis of the stomach. Paresis per se means paralysis. Okay, who gets it? About 20% of the patients with type 1 diabetes. Okay, there are two main types of diabetes, type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. So most of the times type 1 diabetic patients, about 20% of the type 1 diabetic patients may get gastroparesis. Sometimes type 2 patients may also get it. Okay, what is the cause? High blood glucose. Okay, diabetes mellitus, it is responsible for changing the blood sugar levels. Okay, this is mainly the disease of the improper control of the blood sugar levels. So if there is high blood glucose level, then that damages the vagus nerve, and hence the gastric emptying will be slowed down. What are the symptoms? Again, the patients will complain of nausea, vomiting, an early feeling of fullness when they eat, weight loss, abdominal bloating. Bloating is fullness-like sensation, or they feel like discomfort. Okay, then what is the treatment? Since this is due to the diabetes, our goal is to lower the blood glucose. Once the blood glucose is lower, the gastroparesis may be decreased. Okay, another disorder of gastric motility. Okay, we discussed about slow gastric emptying. it can also be rapid. Okay, what are the causes for rapid gastric emptying? It is restrictive gastric operation, in which resective gastric operations, in which the part of the stomach is cut. Then the amount of the food or the chyme that can be stored in the stomach itself will be reduced, and because of that there will be immediately whatever contents come into the stomach will move fast into the duodenum. Okay, so that is rapid gastric emptying, and this is called as dumping syndrome. Okay, whatever is there in the stomach gets immediately dumped into the duodenum because of the resective gastric operations and pyloroplasty. That can also give rise to rapid gastric emptying. Okay, symptoms: these patients may suffer from diarrhea, increase in the osmotic load, hypotension because of decrease in the ECF, extracellular fluid, reactive hypoglycemia, insulin surge from the rapid sugar load. Once the food is coming fast into the duodenum, then there will be proper blood sugar level will not be regulated because of the insulin surge from rapid sugar load, and there will be reactive hypoglycemia. There will be less blood sugar level in response to rapid gastric emptying. Okay, then duodenal ulcer, acid which erodes the duodenal mucosa, that can also give rise to rapid gastric emptying. Okay, because of the rapid gastric emptying, there can be duodenal ulcers. Next is, we move on to the small intestine. Let's discuss about the small intestinal motility. What is small intestinal motility? It contributes to digestion and absorption by mixing of the chyme, circulation of the chyme, and propulsion of the chyme. Mixing of the chyme with digestive enzymes and other secretions, that is due to small intestinal motility. Then circulation of the chyme to achieve the optimal exposure to mucosa. The chyme is circulated within the intestine so that it gets exposed to multiple parts of the mucosa, so that it allows for proper absorption, and propulsion of the chyme in the aboral direction. Aboral is away from the mouth, so towards the anal direction. Okay, the chyme moves gradually towards the anus, that is propulsion of chyme in aboral direction. Okay, what are the movements of the small intestine? Movements of the small intestine can be divided into mixing contraction and propulsive contraction. Okay, let's discuss about the slow waves and spike potentials in the intestinal motility. Okay, the contraction is controlled by slow wave activity. Slow wave frequency is about 12 per minute in the duodenum, 10 per minute in the jejunum, and 8 per minute in the ileum. Okay, so maximum frequency is in the duodenum, then jejunum, and less in the ileum. Contraction frequency is limited by the slow wave frequency. Spike potentials are necessary. Unlike stomach, the contractions do not occur in the absence of spike potentials. Slow wave frequencies along the small intestine. Slow waves are measured at 6 points along the small intestine. Slow wave phase lag, it promotes propagation of contractions, peristalsis, and slow wave frequency decreases at distal portions of the small intestine. 5 to 6 are distal. Okay. Coming to migrating motility complexes. What are these? The purpose of the migrating motor complexes is to sweep the undigested residue towards the colon to maintain low bacterial count in the upper intestine. Okay, that is like a housekeeping function. It is cleaning the undigested residue towards the colon. So in the upper intestine, there will be less bacterial count. Okay, that is the function of these migrating motility complexes. It is a special type of movement in the small intestine that allows for the undigested residue towards to move towards the colon, and because of this migrating motility complexes, there is less bacterial count in the upper intestine. So this is mainly the housekeeping like function. Okay, these are most coordinated and rapid peristaltic movement. It occurs in between the meals. Okay, characteristic periods of intense peristaltic contraction between the meals. It takes about 90 minutes to go from stomach to colon, and it is mediated by the hormone motilin, okay, and enteric nervous system. ENS stands for enteric nervous system. Okay, so that is about migrating motor complexes. Coming to the movements of the intestine, we discussed there are two types of movement. One is mixing movements and one is segmentation. Okay, mixing or segmentation and propulsive contractions. So this is the segmentation. What is the function here? The contractions are occurring at small intervals. So this allows for the food bolus to get broken into smaller particles which can be absorbed properly. Okay. Segmentation contractions. Chop the chyme 2 to 3 times per minute. In this way, promoting the progressive mixing of the food with secretions of the small intestine. Okay. The chyme is propelled through the small intestine by peristaltic waves. 3 to 5 hours are required for passage of chyme from pylorus to the ileocecal valve. Okay. In the small intestine, the food is there for about 3 to 5 hours from pylorus to the ileocecal valve. A principal function of the ileocecal valve is to prevent the backflow of the fecal contents from colon into the small intestine. There is a valve at the opening of the small intestine into the large intestine that is called as ileocecal valve. This is to prevent the backflow of the fecal contents from colon into the small intestine. Okay. Then control of the small intestinal motility. Whether spike potentials and hence contractions occur will depend on the neural and hormonal input. Okay. What are the neural factors that are responsible for the spike potential and contractions? This is PNS, peripheral nervous system. It stimulates the SNS, PNS, that is parasympathetic nervous system, stimulates the small intestinal motility, while the sympathetic nervous system inhibits the small intestinal motility. Okay. PNS is parasympathetic and SNS is sympathetic. Okay. Peristaltic reflex. This is also called as the law of gut. Okay. In the last class, we have discussed about law of gut. Peristaltic reflex, it is mediated by the enteric nervous system. Intestinal reflex. If there is severe distension, it will inhibit the bowel. This is due to the extrinsic nerve. And gastroileal reflex. When meal is there, it will stimulate the gastroileal reflex. Ileocecal sphincter relaxes and ileal peristalsis increases. Okay, this is the gastroileal reflux. Hormones responsible are gastrin, cholecystokinin, and extrinsic nerves. If there are any other factors which are responsible for this is unknown. Okay. So this is about the control of small intestinal motility by nervous factors. Parasympathetic stimulating and sympathetic inhibiting. Okay. Then coming to the hormonal factors. Which are the hormonal factors that control the small intestinal motility? Epinephrine. This is the sympathetic neurotransmitter released from the adrenal gland. It inhibits the motility. Motiline, okay, mediates the migratory motor complexes. Serotonin and prostaglandins. There are large quantities in small intestine that can stimulate the motility. Other hormones like gastrin, cholecystokinin, and insulin stimulate these contractions. Secretin and glucagon inhibit these contractions. The role of these are uncertain. Okay. Now, this is very, very important part about the small intestinal motility, the hormonal factors. You can get different MCQs asking about which hormones favor the small intestinal motility, and the options can be gastrin, cholecystokinin, insulin, then pancreatic hormone or another. So you should be able to pick out the correct answers. Okay. Coming to ileocecal junction. Okay. From small intestine to large intestine. This is the junction. Okay. It functions as a valve, as a sphincter. What is the valvular function? As a valve, it prevents the backflow of the contents into the small intestine mechanically. And what is the sphincter function? It regulates the movement of the ileal contents into large intestine. Gradually, the ileal contents are allowed to go into the large intestine. It is mediated by the enteric nervous system and extrinsic nerves. Okay. So this is the ileocecal valve. Okay. This is the small intestine or the terminal part of the ileum, and this is the ileocecal sphincter. Okay. From the ileum into the cecum. This is the vermiform appendix, the cecum. Now you can see these pinkish are the sphincters, okay, or the valves. Pressure and chemical irritation relax the sphincter and excite peristalsis. If there is pressure in the ileum due to the contents in the ileum, that will pressure and chemical irritation will relax the sphincter so that these contents get passed into the cecum. Fluidity of the contents also promotes emptying. If there is too much fluid, then that will also promote the emptying of the contents into the cecum. Pressure or chemical irritation in the cecum. If there is too much pressure here or too much of the fluids here, then there will be back pressure, and that will prevent this valve. This is one-way valve, so this will close when there is pressure in the cecum, and it will prevent the entry of the or the backflow of the contents into the ileum. Pressure or chemical irritation in cecum inhibits peristalsis of ileum and excites the sphincter. As shown in the figure, ileocecal valve itself protrudes into the lumen of the cecum, and therefore it's forcefully closed when excess pressure builds up in the cecum, and it tries to push the cecal contents backwards against the valve lips. Okay. Motility of large intestine. Functions of large intestinal smooth muscle. One is to mix the chyme, and two is to propel the fecal material. Mixing of the chyme, it enhances the fluid and electrolyte absorption from the haustral contractions, and propulsion of the fecal material is achieved by the mass movement. Okay, we will discuss about it in detail. Absorptive and storage functions of the large intestine. So this is the diagram of the large intestine. You can see this is the ileum, the terminal part of small intestine. This is the cecum, the first part of the large intestine, the vermiform appendix. This is the ascending colon. Here the content is very much fluid. Okay, as it moves further, the content becomes semi-fluid. Okay, this is the hepatic flexure of the colon, the first bend. Okay, this is the transverse colon. The contents here become mushy. Okay, then this is the splenic flexure of the colon. Okay, another bend. Then the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, and the rectum. Okay, so you can see the fluid when it comes into the cecum and ascending colon is fluid. Then near the hepatic flexure it becomes semi-fluid. Then along the transverse colon much more fluid is absorbed, it becomes mushy. Near the hepatic flexure semi-mushy, and as it goes into the descending colon it becomes semi-solid. Terminally when it goes into the rectum and anal canal it becomes solid. Okay, so mainly it is going to absorb the fluid. Poor motility of the large intestine causes greater absorption, and hard feces in transverse colon causes constipation. Okay, if the large intestinal motility is less, then more and more fluid will get absorbed, and the contents in the lumen will become more and more solid, and that can give rise to constipation. Okay, excess motility will cause less absorption and diarrhea or loose feces. Okay, coming to musculature of large intestine. What are the different muscles? Longitudinal smooth muscle. Mainly here it is forming three groups, that is called as tinea cola. Okay, if you see the transverse section, if you open up the intestine and see this band like thing, this is the longitudinal muscle. Okay, there are three strips. This is called as the tinea coli. That is the specialty of the large intestine. The longitudinal smooth muscle is arranged in three groups, that is called as tinea coli. Circular smooth muscle is continuous towards the up to the anus. Internal anal sphincter, it is present a thickening of the circular smooth muscle. There is an external anal sphincter also, which is the striated muscle which surrounds the internal anal sphincter. Okay, and haustra. What are haustra? These are multiple haustrations which are not fixed. They appear and disappear. Okay, these small bag-like dilatations in the large intestine, these are called as haustra or haustrations. Okay. Coming to innervation of large intestine, how is it innervated? By the myenteric plexus. It is concentrated beneath the tinea coli. Okay, the longitudinal smooth muscle that strips, these are called as tinea. Myenteric plexus nerves are concentrated below the tinea coli. Parasympathetic input through vagus, it innervates the proximal colon. The pelvic nerves from sacral segment S2, S3 and S4, they innervate the distal colon, rectum and anus. Sympathetic input T10 to L2. There are two ganglia. Okay, T10 to L2, which are responsible for innervation to the proximal colon. Okay, and the intermediate distal colon and hypogastric plexus responsible for supply to the rectum and anal canal. celiac ganglion, superior mesenteric ganglion, and inferior mesenteric ganglion. Okay, the sympathetic input celiac ganglion and superior mesenteric are responsible for proximal colon's innervation. Inferior mesenteric ganglion responsible for distal colon input, and hypogastric reflexes responsible for rectum and anal canal. Okay, external anal sphincter is innervated by the pudendal nerves. Coming to movements of the colon, function of the colon is mainly absorption of water and electrolytes from the chyme to form the solid feces and storage of the fecal matter until it is suitable to be expelled. The mixing movements that occur in the colon, also called as haustrations, these are combined contractions of the circular and longitudinal strips of muscle which cause the unstimulated portion of the large intestine to bulge outward into bag-like sac called as haustrations. Okay. Haustral contractions. Purpose of these haustral contractions is to mix the movement. Mixing movements facilitate fluid and electrolyte absorption. Thus, there is minimal propulsion. Food is not propelled forward, but mainly allows for the absorption by mixing of the fluid and the electrolyte. Structural and functional basis. They appear and disappear every 30 to 60 seconds. Require contraction of longitudinal and circular smooth muscle. Circular smooth muscle is concentrated in some areas. Okay. Mass movements. This is a special type of movements which is there in the large intestine. Mass movements. These are propulsive movements or modified peristaltic movements. Their purpose is to move the feces to rectum and stimulate the defecation reflex. Distance from transverse colon to the sigmoid colon or rectum. Occurrence. It occurs after meals. Series lasting 10 to 13 minutes. 1 to 2 minutes each. Okay. Reflex is responsible for mass movements. Gastrocolic reflex. We have discussed about this gastrocolic reflex. When the food comes into the stomach, there is response of the colon that it will, there will be defecation. That is called as gastrocolic reflex. Okay. Distension of the stomach will allow for the colonic contents to be evacuated. Okay, this reflex is prominent in small children. Okay, then duodenocolic reflex. When there is food in the duodenum, there will be response of the colon. Okay, duodenocolic reflex. Distension of the duodenum will stimulate the evacuation of the colon. Okay, so these are the responses which are responsible for reflexes responsible for mass movements. Okay. Coming to propulsive movements or mass movements. Mass movement is a modified type of peristalsis characterized by following sequence of events. First, a constrictive ring appears in response to a distended or irritated point in the colon, usually in the transverse colon. So once there is any distension or irritation in the transverse colon, there will be appearance of a constrictive ring. Then rapidly 20 or more centimeters of the colon distal to that constrictive ring lose their haustrations and instead contract as a unit. Okay, so this is a large segment of the large intestine, 20 or more centimeters. They will lose their haustration and contract as a unit, propelling the fecal material in this segment en masse as a total mass further down the colon. Okay, the contractions develop progressively, more force for about 30 seconds, and relaxation occurs during the next 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. Then another mass movement occurs, this time perhaps farther along the colon. So thus the colonic contents are propelled forward. Appearance of mass movements after meals is facilitated by gastrocolic and duodenocolic reflexes. Okay. Defecation. Most of the time, the rectum is empty of feces. When mass movement forces the feces into the rectum, the desire for defecation occurs immediately, including reflex contraction of the rectum and relaxation of the anal sphincter. An internal anal sphincter, a several centimeter long thickening of the circular smooth muscle that lies immediately inside the anus, and there is an external anal sphincter which is composed of striated voluntary muscle that both surrounds the internal anal sphincter and extends distal to it. The external sphincter is controlled by nerve fibers in the pudendal nerve, which is part of the somatic nervous system, and therefore it is under voluntary, conscious or at least subconscious control. Okay, internal anal sphincter is not under the conscious control. External anal sphincter is under the voluntary control. Subconsciously, the external sphincter is usually kept continuously constricted unless conscious signals inhibit the constriction. Okay, if the conditions are favorable, the external anal sphincter will contract and there will be defecation occurring. Okay. What is defecation reflexes? When feces enter the rectum, distension of the rectal wall initiates the afferent signals that spread through the myenteric plexus to initiate peristaltic waves in the descending colon, sigmoid and rectum, forcing the feces towards the anus. As the peristaltic wave approaches the anus, the internal anal sphincter is relaxed by inhibitory signals from the myenteric plexus. If the external anal sphincter is also consciously, voluntarily relaxed at the same time, the defecation will occur. Okay. When the nerve endings in the rectum are stimulated, signals are transmitted first into the spinal cord and then reflexly back to the descending colon. Okay. So if there is rectum full, then the signal will be transmitted first to the spinal cord and then back to the descending colon, sigmoid, rectum and anus by way of parasympathetic nerve fibers in the pelvic nerves. Okay, these parasympathetic signals are greatly intensify the peristaltic waves and relax the internal anal sphincter, thus converting the intrinsic myenteric defecation reflex from a weak effort into a powerful process of defecation. Okay, how is the defecation controlled? There are three levels of the control. One is intrinsic reflex, another is spinal cord reflex, and the last is the involvement of higher centers. Okay, so coming to intrinsic defecation reflex. Intrinsic reflex is mediated entirely by enteric nervous system and initiated when the feces enters the rectum via mass movement. Rectal distension initiates afferent signals that spread through the myenteric plexus to descending and sigmoid colon and rectum. This causes contractions that force the feces towards the anus. Internal anal sphincter relaxes, and if external anal sphincter is voluntarily relaxed, the defecation will occur. Okay. Defecation reflex at the spinal cord level. Parasympathetic cord reflex greatly intensifies the intrinsic reflex, but it is not different qualitatively. Rectal distension also initiates cord reflex. Afferent signals go to sacral cord and then back to the descending and sigmoid colon and rectum by way of parasympathetic fibers in the pelvic nerves. The lower neurons S2 to S4 provide sensory and motor fibers for defecation reflex. They are intact when the spinal cord is injured at higher levels. Afferent and efferent pathways of the parasympathetic mechanism for enhancing the defecation reflex. Okay, so here you can see this is the descending colon, the sigmoid colon, the rectum, and the anal canal. The external sphincter is here and the internal sphincter. Okay, this is the spinal segment. From conscious cortex, the signals will be from the higher centers into the spinal cord. Okay, the afferent nerves. So you can see the afferent nerves are from the sphincter, the rectum, and even the sigmoid and descending colon. All this is afferent. Okay, parasympathetic nerve fibers through the pelvic nerve is here. Okay, the afferent goes from the rectum towards the spinal cord, and this is the parasympathetic nerve fiber coming through the via the pelvic nerves, innervating the sphincter, internal sphincter, the rectum, and the descending and sigmoid colon. And there is another thing from the higher centers. Okay, from the conscious cortex to the skeletal motor nerves. Okay, this will be relaxing the external anal sphincter if there is favorable environment. Defecation reflex higher centers. Afferent signals entering the spinal cord initiate other effects that require intact spinal cord. Deep breath, closure of the glottis, and increased abdominal pressure all work to move the fecal contents downwards. Okay, spinal transaction or injury can make defecation a difficult process. If there is any trauma to the spinal cord, or it is cut through transversely, or damage to the spinal cord, then the defecation may become difficult. Cord defecation reflex can be excited either digitally or with enema. Okay. Colon motility disorders. Paralysis of defecation reflex occurs in spinal cord injuries. What occurs? Destruction of the conus medullaris, that is the portion of the medulla. Only intrinsic reflex becomes functional. That means the spinal cord control is lost. If there is destruction between the conus medullaris and brain, the intrinsic reflex and local cord reflexes are functional. function of external anal sphincter, whether it is there or not in the paralysis, is not sure. Okay. Coming to encopresis. What is encopresis? It is frequent bowel movement accidents in child older than 4 years. Okay. Up to 4 years, we said that gastrocolic reflex is active. So in a child less than 4 years, once there is entry of food into the stomach, there will be reflex defecation. But if it persists more than 4 years, that is frequent bowel movement, then it is called as encopresis. Okay. Incidence about 1 to 3% of children, mostly boys, it is seen. What is the cause? It is supposed to be chronic constipation, which causes hard and dry feces to build up in the colon in about 80 to 95% of the cases. It is distended colon, eliminates the normal defecation sensation, leading to accidents. Okay. Semi-liquid fecal matter exists around the hard mass. However, feces may appear normal. Another colon motility disorder is Hirschsprung's disease or megacolon. Okay, it affects about 1 in 5,000 children. Cause is the ganglion cell absent from the segments of the colon, and because of that, the vasoactive intestinal peptide levels are low, and hence the smooth muscle constriction will not be there. Loss of coordinated movement, and colon contents accumulate. That is colon equivalent of achalasia. Achalasia cardia is the condition which occurs in the lower end of the esophagus. We have discussed that if the lower end of the esophagus fails to dilate, then the food accumulates in the lower end of the esophagus. That is called as achalasia cardia. Okay. Similarly, here, because of the loss of the ganglion cells in the segment of the colon, the smooth muscle constriction does not occur in the colon, and then the colonic content accumulate. That is large colon or megacolon. Okay. How do you treat this? It is surgical resection of the colon segment which lacks the ganglion. You have to surgically remove that segment. Okay. Another disorder is diverticulitis. Okay. When pouches become inflated, condition is called as diverticulitis. Okay. It occurs in 10 to 25% of the person with diverticulosis. Infection is caused by stool or bacteria getting caught in the diverticula. Diverticulum is a abnormal like opening in the large intestine. Okay. If there is infection by stool or bacteria, then it gets caught in the diverticulum, and then that pouch becomes inflamed. That is called as diverticulitis. Diverticulitis can lead to complications such as infections, perforations or tears, blockages or bleeding. Okay. So we have discussed about the gastric motility per se from the mouth up to the anus. Okay. Which are the different sphincters that are involved in gastric GIT? Upper esophageal sphincter, also called as pharyngoesophageal sphincter. Lower esophageal sphincter, also called as gastroesophageal sphincter or cardiac sphincter. Pyloric sphincter, that is the gastroduodenal sphincter. Ileocecal valve or ileocecal sphincter. Internal anal sphincter and external anal sphincter. Okay, what are the different reflexes that we have studied? Peristaltic reflex, stretch of the bowel, proximal contraction and distal relaxation that occurs. If there is stretching of the bowel, there is proximal contraction and distal part will relax. So thus the bolus will get transferred from proximally to distally. Okay. Enterogastric reflex from duodenum to regulate the gastric emptying. Gastroileal reflex or gastroenteric reflex, gastric distension relaxes the ileocecal sphincter. Another reflex, intestinal reflex. Over distension or injury of bowel segment causes entire bowel to relax. Okay. Gastro and duodenocolic reflex. If there is distension of the stomach or duodenum, it will initiate the mass movement. And defecation reflex, that is rectosphincteric reflex. Rectal distension initiates defecation. Okay. So that's all about the motility. Let's have few questions. Okay. Are you all ready to answer few MCQs? Yes. The first question is here in front of you. The swallowing center in the medulla has a critical role in totally inhibiting which of the following when food is swallowed? Esophageal peristalsis, pharyngeal peristalsis, primary peristalsis, receptive relaxation and respiration. What is the correct answer?
Ma'am, pharyngeal peristalsis.
swallowing center in the medulla?
Ma'am, respiratory.
Who's that?
Sorry, ma'am, it's respiratory.
Yes, there is
Yes.
a reflex apnea during the swallowing. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
correct. Mass movements are often stimulated after a meal. By which reflex? Coloileal reflex, enterogastric reflex, gastrocolic reflex, intestinal reflex. What is the
Ma'am,
answer?
gas,
Gastrocolic reflex.
gastrocolic.
This we have discussed today. Achalasia is associated with which of the following at rest and during swallowing? Higher than normal pressure at lower esophageal sphincter, lower than normal pressure at lower esophageal sphincter, higher than normal at upper esophageal sphincter, lower than normal at upper esophageal sphincter. Okay. You have to find out the answers to these questions. Okay. Brief answer questions that can be asked about these topic. 2-mark question. Enlist different types of movements in GIT. State the law of gut. What is achalasia cardia? What are migrating motor complexes? What is megaesophagus? What is megacolon? What is Hirschsprung disease? All these can be asked as 2-mark questions. Okay. Short notes or 5 marks. You can be asked about discuss pharyngeal phase of deglutition. Describe different intestinal movements. Discuss about defecation reflex. In short, enlist gastrointestinal reflexes. Discuss about any one reflex. Okay. Long answer question for 10 marks. Enlist the phases of deglutition. Discuss the physiology of deglutition. Describe achalasia cardia and megaesophagus. Okay. So that's all for today. Thank you. Next class, we will be discussing about the different secretions in the GIT. That is the saliva, gastric secretion and pancreatic secretions. Please come prepared for the class. Okay.